Caleb Turner woke up each morning before the sun rose, long before the roosters even thought about crowing. His small ranch sat between gentle Montana hills, where the sky always seemed wider than anywhere else. The air smelled of hay, damp soil, and pine. It should have been a peaceful life, and in many ways it was, but the quietness often felt too heavy for him. His 8-year-old son, Evan, was still asleep when Caleb stepped outside to start the day. He always paused for a moment, watching the soft light touch the barn roof, and wished, just for a second, that someone else stood beside him to share it. Caleb had grown used to living with silence. It had settled into his home after his wife passed away 2 years earlier. For a while he tried to fill the silence with music, with radio, talk shows, with busy work, but nothing helped for long. The only thing that kept him moving was responsibility. The ranch, the animals, and most important, his son. Evan was a small boy with gentle eyes, always curious but often quiet. He loved books, horses, and riding around the ranch on the old pony Caleb had bought for him. But when his mother passed, something inside him dimmed. He became shy in school, spoke less, smiled less. He still laughed sometimes, especially when the pony sneezed or when the ranch dog chased its tail. But the laughter didn't come as easily as before. Caleb tried his best. He cooked breakfast every morning, packed Evan's lunch, and drove him to school before heading to the fields. But balancing everything was hard. The ranch could not maintain itself without constant work. Machinery broke down, fences needed fixing, and animals needed care. There were days when Caleb came home aching all over, only to find a school notice he had forgotten to sign or a math assignment Evan needed help with. Some nights he fell asleep on the couch with his boots still on. He didn't complain. But deep down, he missed having someone to talk to, someone who understood what it felt like to carry everything alone. Across the county, in a small rental house that always felt too cold in winter, Mara Jensen was learning to live through her own kind of silence. She was a tall woman with a sturdy frame, gentle hands, and a calm voice. People sometimes noticed her height before anything else, calling her strong-looking or solid. But those who worked with her knew she had a soft heart. She'd lost her husband in a sudden logging accident nearly a year ago, leaving her and her daughter Lily to face the world without him. Since then, every day had felt like climbing a hill that never ended. After her husband's passing, Mara had moved from their old home to this small rental because she couldn't afford the mortgage anymore. The new place had peeling paint, old windows that let in drafts, and rooms that felt smaller each time winter winds blew. But she worked hard to make it feel warm. She cooked for Lily, read to her at night, and worked part-time jobs, anything she could find that paid even a little. At 8 years old, Lily was a soft-spoken, dreamy child who loved drawing. She would sketch mountains, tall trees, and birds with wings spread wide. But she, too, had grown quiet since her father passed. She clung to her mother a little more, slept a little closer, and sometimes woke up with tears she couldn't explain. Mara did her best to keep life gentle for her daughter. But rent was always late, bills always piled up, and the heater broke down more often than it worked. To earn extra money, she took a part-time job at the local farmers' cooperative, stocking shelves and helping customers. That's where she first met Caleb Turner. On the day they met, Caleb had come in to buy cattle feed. He set heavy bags on a cart and turned to look for an employee to help him check out. Mara walked over with a small smile, wearing a work apron and gloves. "Need help with that?" she asked, even though he had already lifted the bags easily. Caleb looked at her. Slightly surprised by her height, she nearly matched him, and then returned her smile. "I think I've got it handled. But thank you." She helped anyway, scanning the bags and making conversation. Caleb noticed how gentle her voice was, how she spoke with both kindness and a quiet exhaustion that he recognized. They didn't talk long, but when Caleb drove away that afternoon, he found himself thinking about her. It wasn't romantic. Not then. It was simply the feeling of meeting someone who understood what it meant to keep going even when life felt too heavy. Over the next few months, Caleb saw her at the co-op now and then. They exchanged polite greetings and small conversations about the weather, the price of hay, and how quickly winter was approaching. Each time he saw her, he noticed something different. The way she carefully tied her hair back with a band she kept around her wrist. The way she talked about her daughter, the way she always looked a little tired but never defeated. One morning early in December, he saw her outside the co-op before it opened. She was leaning against the wall, rubbing her arms for warmth despite her thick coat. Her face looked pale, tired in a way that worried him. "Everything okay?" he asked, walking toward her. She smiled quickly, as if trying to hide whatever was wrong. "Just a long night. My daughter wasn't feeling well." Caleb nodded, sympathy rising in his chest. "Is she all right?" "I think so," Mara said softly. "Just a cold, I hope." "What about school? Will she stay home?" Mara hesitated before answering. "Yes. But it's complicated. My landlord says the heating's my responsibility. But the heater's barely working, and I can't afford to fix it yet." Caleb's stomach tightened. He knew Montana winters were unforgiving, especially for children. The idea of a sick little girl in a freezing house troubled him deeply. "If you need anything," he started to say, but Mara gently shook her head. "You already do enough by being kind," she said. "Thank you." She went inside to start her shift, leaving Caleb standing in the cold, thinking about her words much longer than he expected. Meanwhile, life at the ranch remained busy. Snow began falling earlier than usual that year, creating long days of clearing paths and making sure the animals stayed warm. One evening after dinner, Evan sat at the kitchen table with his school notebook open but untouched. He stared at the paper without writing a single word. "Trouble with homework?" Caleb asked, washing dishes at the sink. Evan shrugged. "It's not homework." Caleb dried his hands and sat beside him. "What is it then?" "It's an assignment," Evan said softly. "We're supposed to write about our family." Caleb's throat tightened. "Oh, I wrote about you," Evan explained, pushing the notebook toward him. "But the page looks empty." Caleb glanced at the paper. Evan had written a few lines, simple words describing life on the ranch, but the space beneath them stretched blank and lonely. "I want to write more," Evan whispered. "But Mom's not here. Families usually have two parents." "Right?" Caleb felt a painful mix of guilt and helplessness. He rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "Families come in all shapes, buddy. There's no wrong way to be a family." Evan nodded, but his eyes carried a longing that Caleb couldn't ignore. "Do you—" Evan hesitated, tracing the edge of the notebook. "Do you ever think about having someone else here? Someone who could help you? Someone who could be like a mom to me?" Caleb froze. His heart clenched at the question, not because it was hard, but because it revealed something his son had kept quiet for too long. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted honestly. "But it's not so simple." "I know," Evan said, lowering his head. "I just miss her. And sometimes I feel like you're tired all the time." Caleb swallowed hard. He didn't want Evan to worry about him. But the boy wasn't wrong. That night, after Evan went to bed, Caleb sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the old wooden surface. He felt the weight of his son's words settle deep inside. Evan didn't just want a mother figure, he needed someone who could provide warmth, guidance, and emotional support, things Caleb tried to give but struggled to deliver while running the ranch alone. The memory of Mara standing in the cold outside the co-op drifted into his thoughts. Her tired smile, her sick daughter, her broken heater, her quiet strength. She was fighting her own battles, just like him. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that their lives were starting to bend toward each other. Almost like two branches leaning in the same direction because the wind pushed them so. And somewhere between the snowy fields and the quiet kitchen, a strange and unexpected thought began to form. Not a romantic one, not yet, but something practical. Something rooted in need and kindness. He didn't speak it aloud. Not yet. But it waited quietly in the back of his mind, taking shape as winter deepened, and the nights grew colder for both families. Winter settled deeper over the county as December passed, covering the roads and fields with a thick, soft blanket of snow. Most days were cold enough that people hurried from their cars to buildings without stopping to talk. But inside the farmers' cooperative, where the heaters hummed and the smell of warm coffee lingered, Caleb often found a reason to linger a little longer, especially on the days he saw Mara working. She always greeted him with the same small smile, tired at the edges but sincere. Sometimes her cheeks were red from the cold, other times her eyes looked shadowed from lack of sleep. But she always tried to stand straight, shoulders firm, even when she seemed close to sinking under the weight of her own worries. One morning, Caleb came in to buy winter feed. The co-op was quieter than usual, only a few customers scattered between the aisles. Mara was stocking shelves with gloved hands, lifting heavier boxes than most people her size could manage, though she didn't complain. When she saw Caleb, she smiled, pushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Morning," she said gently. "Morning," he replied, taking a moment to study her face. "How's Lily doing? Any better?" Mara hesitated before answering. "She's still coughing, but she's trying to be brave." "And the heater?" Caleb asked carefully. "It's the same," she said with a sigh. "The landlord said he'll look at it, but I'm not sure when. I've been keeping Lily in the warmest room and letting her use all the blankets." She tried to smile but couldn't hide the worry in her voice. "We'll manage. We always do." Caleb nodded slowly, but a knot tightened in his chest. He imagined Mara staying up through the night, checking Lily's temperature, worrying whether the house was too cold for her daughter to get better. He pictured them both, wrapped in blankets, in a living room that barely held any warmth. It wasn't right, not in a winter this harsh. He wished he could help, but he didn't know how to offer without making her feel uncomfortable. She was proud. She tried to stand on her own feet, even when the ground beneath her was shaky. Later that day, after he left the co-op, Caleb went home with heavy thoughts swirling around in his mind. He found Evan sitting by the window, watching snowflakes drift down like tiny feathers. "You're quiet today," Caleb said gently. Evan shrugged. "Just thinking. About school? A little." "But—" Evan turned from the window to face him. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think families can be made in different ways? Like, not the usual way?" Caleb paused, surprised by the question. "Yes, I think so." "Why do you ask?" "Because my teacher said families come in all forms," Evan explained softly. "And I was thinking about that. Sometimes I wish—" He stopped, looking down at his hands. "I wish we had someone else here. Someone who could help you. Someone who could help me too." Caleb reached over and gently touched his shoulder. "I know, buddy. I really do." Evan's voice lowered even more. "I like the way Mrs. Jensen talks to people at the co-op. She's nice. She always remembers my name. And she asks about school." Caleb blinked, slightly startled that his son had noticed her too. "She's a good person. Lily is nice too," Evan added. "She gave me a drawing at school once. She's quiet. Like me." Caleb leaned back, absorbing his son's thoughts. He didn't know whether to feel surprised or moved. Evan wasn't the kind of child to talk much about feelings. But Mara and Lily had both lingered in his mind, and apparently in Evan's as well. That night, after Evan went to bed, Caleb sat in front of the fireplace, the room glowing with soft golden light. He kept thinking about Mara's struggling heater, Lily's quiet bravery, Evan's loneliness, and the endless winter that made everything harder. He felt something stirring inside him, not an idea at first, just a feeling. A sense that two families, both hurting in different ways, were standing close to the same cliff. And maybe, just maybe, they could help each other keep from falling. But the thought felt too big, too strange to say out loud. So he kept it tucked away, like a seed waiting for the right moment. A week later, the moment came. Mara missed a few days at the co-op. And when she returned, she looked more tired than ever. Her eyes were softer, more fragile, as if she'd barely slept. Caleb approached her carefully. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern clear in his voice. She offered a weak smile. "Lily's been out of school. Her cough got worse. I couldn't leave her alone." "Is she getting better at least?" "Yes, slowly. But, Mara lowered her voice, my landlord wasn't happy about the late rent. And he reminded me again that the heater repair is my responsibility. Caleb felt something inside him shift. Not anger, just a deep ache. He tried to keep his voice steady. That's not fair to you. Life isn't always fair, Mara said softly. We just learn to keep going. Caleb stepped closer, speaking gently. And you're doing too much on your own. We don't have a choice, she whispered. He looked at her then, not as a customer looks at an employee, but as one human being looks at another who is hanging on with tired hands. Her shoulders were strong, but her spirit looked worn. He knew what that felt like. He had lived it. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Lily's school called Mara while she was at work. Lily had grown weak and needed to go home. There was worry that she might get worse if she stayed in a cold house. Mara panicked. She didn't have enough money to miss more shifts, but she couldn't leave Lily alone either. She ended up running through the snow to pick her up, taking her home early. Caleb heard about it from the woman at the co-op's front counter. That Jensen girl looked pale, she said quietly. Poor thing. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He paced his kitchen, thinking about Evan's quiet confession, about Mara's exhausted eyes, about Lily shivering in a house without proper heat. Finally, he sat down at the table and pressed his hands together, fingers tight. The idea that had been sitting in the back of his mind for weeks suddenly came forward, clear, simple, and frightening in its honesty. Two families were struggling. He had a warm home but no partner to share the work or guide Evan in the gentle ways he needed. Mara had strength, kindness, and a daughter who needed stability. They both had empty places in their lives where love used to be. The next morning, he drove to the co-op. Not for feed or tools, but to look for Mara. When he found her, she was unloading a shipment of supplies, her face pale from another long, sleepless night. Can we talk? Caleb asked softly. She nodded, setting down the box. He took a deep breath, choosing each word carefully. Mara, I've been thinking a lot. About you. About Lily. And about Evan too. She watched him with cautious eyes, unsure what he meant. You're doing everything you can, he said gently. But you shouldn't have to do it alone. And neither should I. Mara blinked, confused. Caleb, what are you saying? He swallowed hard, feeling his heart beat faster than it had in years. You need stability, he said quietly. A warm home. A place where Lily can grow without worry. She nodded slowly, still unsure where this was going. And Evan needs something too, he continued. He needs warmth, structure, and someone who can show him the things I can't. Her breathing slowed. She looked almost afraid of the words she thought might be coming. Caleb hesitated only a moment before finishing the thought. Your daughter needs a home, he said softly. And my son needs a mother. Mara inhaled sharply, her eyes widening with shock. Caleb, are you asking what I think you're asking? Yes, he whispered. I'm asking if you'd consider joining our families. Not because of romance, not because of pressure, but because it might help both of us, all four of us. Mara stepped back slightly, unsteady. That's a lot. It is, Caleb agreed gently, and I know it sounds sudden. But sometimes life pushes us toward choices we never expected. She stared at him for a long moment, torn between disbelief, fear, and the deep weariness of trying to survive alone. Her eyes glistened, not with sadness, but with the overwhelming weight of his words. I need time, she whispered. Take all you need, he said softly. I didn't say this lightly. She nodded slowly, pressing a hand to her chest, as if trying to steady her thoughts. As Caleb walked away from the co-op that day, he wasn't sure whether he had made the biggest mistake of his life or taken the first step toward saving two families at once. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a quiet hope flicker inside him, small but warm, like a candle in the snow. The days after Caleb's unexpected proposal passed slowly for Mara. She thought about his words almost constantly while cooking breakfast, while helping Lily with schoolwork, While walking to her shift at the co-op, the idea of joining their families was enormous, almost unbelievable, and she wasn't sure she understood it fully. Marriage wasn't just a word to her, it was a promise, a responsibility, a bond that shaped two lives into one. She had already lived through the loss of one marriage, and the thought of entering another made her heart tremble. But she couldn't ignore the truth either. Her home was cold. Her daughter was recovering too slowly, and her life felt like a rope pulled too tightly at every end. Caleb's offer had not come from selfishness or pity. She could see it in the way he spoke, careful and steady. He wasn't trying to save her, he was offering a way to save each other. Still, it was a decision she didn't take lightly. At the ranch, Caleb tried to keep his days normal, but his mind wandered more than usual. He would be mending a fence and suddenly hear his own voice from that day repeating the words, "Your daughter needs a home, and my son needs a mother." Sometimes he wondered if it had been foolish to speak so boldly. Other times he felt a quiet certainty that he had done the right thing. Evan sensed something had changed. He watched his father more closely, noticing how Caleb paused sometimes in the middle of tasks. One evening, while they were brushing down the horses together, Evan spoke up. "Dad, did something happen?" Caleb looked down at his son. "Why do you ask?" You seem different," Evan replied softly. "Like you're waiting for something." Caleb smiled, a tired but gentle smile. "Maybe I am. Is it something good?" Evan asked, brushing the pony's coat in slow strokes. Caleb hesitated before answering. "I hope so, buddy. I really hope so." Evan didn't press further. He trusted his father, even when he didn't understand everything. A few days later, Mara called Caleb and asked if she could visit the ranch with Lily. Her voice shook slightly on the phone, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision she was trying to make. Caleb agreed immediately, though he felt his heart race a little. On Saturday morning, Mara drove to the ranch in her old car, its tires crunching softly over the snow-covered driveway. Lily sat in the back seat, wrapped in a warm blanket, holding a small drawing pad. Her cheeks were still a little pale, but she looked brighter than she had the week before. Caleb and Evan were waiting outside, bundled up in warm coats. When Mara stepped out of the car, she took a moment to look around. The ranch was peaceful, almost calming, a wide stretch of land covered in soft snow, surrounded by wooden fences and quiet hills. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "Thank you," Caleb replied. He looked toward Lily. "How are you feeling today?" "A bit better," she whispered. Evan stepped forward, shy but smiling. "I'm glad." Lily smiled back. It was small, but it was real. Caleb opened the door to the house and led them inside. Warm air rushed out, carrying the smell of cinnamon and freshly baked bread. Mara felt her shoulders relax without meaning to. Her own house often felt cold no matter how many blankets she used. Here, the heat seemed to settle gently around her like a soft coat. "I made some tea," Caleb said, "and hot chocolate for the kids." Evan brightened at the mention of hot chocolate, and Lily's eyes followed his reaction with curiosity. They all gathered around the kitchen table. The room was simple but warm, with hand-built shelves, soft lighting, and a large window that looked out onto the snowy fields. Mara noticed little details, pictures of Evan on the walls, a homemade wooden clock, a quilt draped over the couch. Everything felt lived in and cared for. After the kids settled with their drinks, Caleb and Mara stepped into the living room to talk quietly. "You didn't have to invite us today," Mara said gently. "I wanted to," Caleb replied. "I thought maybe seeing the place would help you decide." Mara sighed softly. "It's not that I don't appreciate your offer. I do. More than I can explain. It's just, marriage is a big step." "I know," he said, "and I don't want you to feel pressured. I want you to choose what's best for you and Lily." Mara looked down at her gloved hands. "You're kind, Caleb, and I don't have many people in my life who are kind." Caleb shook his head. "You deserve kindness, Mara. And so does your daughter." Signed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet between them felt honest, not uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Evan took Lily to see the pony outside after she finished her hot chocolate. They walked slowly, Evan careful not to rush her. He showed her how the snow piled up along the fence, how the horses' breaths made little clouds in the cold air. Lily watched everything with quiet wonder. She had always loved animals, and seeing a ranch up close made her eyes brighter. "This is Daisy," Evan said, patting the pony's neck. "She's pretty," Lily whispered. "She's gentle too," Evan added. "You can pet her if you want." Lily reached out carefully. Daisy nudged her hand softly, and Lily giggled a sound that made Evan grin widely. It felt like the ranch itself breathed easier hearing the small, sweet sound. When they returned inside, Lily looked more relaxed, and Evan looked proud, like he had done something important. Mara noticed the difference too. "She looks happier," she said softly to Caleb. "Evan has that effect on people." Caleb replied with a small smile. "He's quiet, but he understands things." Later, Caleb gave Mara a tour of the house. He showed her the kitchen, the living room, the laundry room, the extra storage area. When they reached the spare bedroom, the one he imagined might one day be hers, Mara stopped in the doorway. The room was simple but warm. A handmade quilt lay over the bed, its colors soft and gentle. A small dresser sat near the window, and a lamp gave off a soft golden glow. "You fixed this room up recently," Mara said quietly, touching the quilt with one hand. "I thought it might be good to have it ready," Caleb admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "Just in case you needed it." Mara didn't speak for a moment. Her eyes softened in a way he hadn't seen before. "You're thoughtful," she said gently. "I try," Caleb answered, though his voice carried a nervous tremble. They returned to the living room where the kids were drawing together. Evan and Lily sat on the rug, sharing colored pencils. Lily drew a small cabin under a starry sky. Evan drew a horse running across a field. Their drawings ended up touching in the middle like two pieces of a puzzle. When it was time for Mara and Lily to leave, the sun was already beginning to set. Caleb walked them to the car. "Thank you for today," Mara said, tightening her scarf. "It meant a lot." "You're welcome," he said. She opened the car door but paused before getting in. "Caleb," she said softly, meeting his eyes. "I haven't made a final decision yet, but today helped. That's all I hoped for," he replied. She looked down, gathering her thoughts. "When my husband passed away, I thought the world would always feel heavy. But today, it felt a little lighter." Caleb's chest warmed. "I'm glad." She got into the car, and Caleb gently closed the door for her. As she drove away, he watched the car's red tail lights disappear down the snowy road. He didn't know what her decision would be, but for the first time, he felt a quiet peace inside him. That night, Mara tucked Lily into bed. The heater made a small groaning sound, struggling to warm the room. Lily snuggled under her blankets. "Mom?" she asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart." "Evan's house was warm," she whispered. "And he's nice, and Daisy is cute." Mara brushed Lily's hair gently. "I noticed. Do you like Mr. Turner?" Lily asked, her voice fading with sleep. Mara hesitated before answering. "I think he is a good man." Lily nodded sleepily. It felt like a real home. Mara's breath caught for a moment. She kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "Good night, my love." But even after Lily fell asleep, Mara remained sitting on the edge of the bed. The cold air brushed against her arms, reminding her of every worry she carried. Yet her mind drifted back to the ranch, the warmth, the safety, the quiet comfort of being understood. She knew she couldn't wait much longer. Her daughter needed stability. Caleb had offered it with open hands, not out of pride, but out of genuine care, and she, too, was tired of fighting every battle alone. The decision forming in her heart scared her, but it also felt right. Not perfect, not easy, but right in a way that warmed her more than any broken heater ever could. And far across the county, Caleb Turner sat beside his own sleeping son, hoping quietly that tomorrow or someday soon Mara would choose them. Choose him. Choose a future where two broken families could learn to be whole again. The days after the courthouse wedding felt strangely calm for both John and Clara. It was as if life had suddenly paused, allowing the two of them to take a deep breath before stepping into a new chapter. The ranch was quiet under the early morning sun, and the fields glowed softly as winter began to loosen its hold. Clara was the first to rise, as always. She had lived many years needing to manage everything alone, and waking up early had become part of her nature. She made breakfast, fed the animals, and checked the water troughs. But now, there were small signs everywhere that she wasn't alone anymore. Sometimes she would see John's boots near the kitchen door, covered in dry mud. Other times, she would find Lily's tiny jacket hanging neatly on a hook, something she never would have noticed before. The house felt fuller. The rooms carried more warmth. Her footsteps no longer echoed the way they used to. And even though she didn't say it aloud, she liked this new feeling. John, on the other hand, felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. Every time he saw Clara step into the kitchen or walk across the yard, he felt a little lighter. He had expected things to feel awkward after the marriage, but instead, everything felt strangely natural. He still remembered the moment she signed the papers at the courthouse, how her large hand held the pen with surprising gentleness, how she looked at him afterward with calm eyes, not nervous or doubtful. She simply accepted the agreement, accepted him, and accepted a new life as if she had been preparing her whole life for this very step. They didn't act like lovers, not yet. But there was a quiet understanding between them, a comfort that didn't need to be spoken. They were partners now, and partners helped each other. One morning, John walked into the kitchen and found Clara cooking breakfast. She wore a simple apron, and her hair was tied back with a cloth. She looked peaceful. He stood by the doorway for a moment, watching her. She was taller than him, much taller, but there was no discomfort in it anymore. He had learned that her height wasn't what defined her. It was her patience, her kindness, her steady strength. "Morning," he said softly. She turned and nodded. "Good morning. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Too much to think about." She raised an eyebrow. "Anything troubling you?" "No," he said, smiling a little. "Just thinking about how life is changing." She didn't respond right away, but the corner of her mouth lifted just slightly. For Clara, that small smile was more expressive than most people's wide grins. "Change is not always bad," she said quietly. Lily ran into the kitchen then, holding her stuffed horse. She was smiling brightly, something she didn't often do before Clara and Michael entered their lives. She hugged Clara's leg tightly. "Aunt Clara," she said, because the word Mama still felt too heavy to say aloud. "Can we visit the barn today?" Clara bent down, lifted the little girl with surprising ease, and nodded. "Of course. After breakfast." John watched them with a soft heart. Every time Lily smiled that openly, he felt grateful. Truly grateful. Michael arrived a few minutes later, rubbing his eyes and complaining about how early it was. But even he had changed. He wasn't as serious as before. He laughed more. He teased Lily in a gentle way. And sometimes, he even called John, Sir. Though John told him many times he didn't need to. They sat together for breakfast, and for the first time in years, the table felt complete. Later that day, Clara helped John mend a broken fence. She carried the heavy wooden boards as if they weighed nothing, while John hammered nails and checked measurements. They worked well together, and the silence between them felt comfortable. "You know," John said after a while, "Lily talks about you all the time." Clara looked down at him. "What does she say?" "That she likes how warm your hugs are," he said with a smile. Clara's cheeks turned slightly pink. "I'm glad she feels comfortable." "She loves you," John said simply. "Both the kids do." Clara paused, her eyes softening. "I care for them deeply. They're good children. And they're happy," John added. "Happier than before." Clara gave a slow nod. "I want to keep it that way." A gentle breeze blew through the field. Birds perched on the fence, chirping softly, as if blessing the conversation. John hesitated before speaking again. "Clara, I want you to know something. I didn't marry you out of pity or desperation." She looked at him calmly. I know. He blinked. You do? You needed someone to help care for Lily, she said. And I needed a safe place for Michael. But that doesn't mean the decision was empty. She lifted a board and set it gently on the fence. We chose this life. And we are doing our best. That is enough for now. John breathed out slowly. Somehow her words eased a weight he didn't know he was carrying. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch began to feel like a true home for both families. Clara cooked meals with fresh vegetables from the small garden. John repaired an old swing behind the house for Lily and Michael to share. The two children developed a bond of their own. Lily admired Michael, and Michael had grown protective of her. One evening, a storm approached. Dark clouds gathered over the mountains, and the wind grew stronger. John was out checking the animals, making sure everything was secure before the rain came. Clara joined him with a lantern. You should be inside, he said. It's going to storm. So should you, she replied. Two people work faster than one. She helped him herd the animals into the shelter. Thunder rumbled across the sky, and rain began to fall. Lightning streaked across the clouds, illuminating the field in bright flashes. As they hurried to the barn, John slipped on the wet ground. Clara caught his arm quickly, steadying him with her strong hands. You okay? She asked. He nodded, a little embarrassed. Thank you. They reached the barn, breathless but safe. The sound of rain hitting the roof was loud but calming. They checked each stall carefully, making sure all the animals were secure. When they finally sat on a hay bale to rest, John realized he was sitting closer to Clara than he had ever been. The lantern light cast a warm glow on her face. She looked both strong and gentle. I've been wanting to ask you something, John said quietly. She looked at him, waiting. How do you feel about being here? About all of this? He asked. Clara took a moment before answering. At first, I wasn't sure. I worried that I would not fit in, that people would not accept me. But now, she looked toward the door where the rain continued to fall. Now I feel safe. And appreciated. John nodded slowly. Good. I'm glad. She met his eyes. What about you, John? I feel blessed, he said truthfully. More than I expected. Their eyes held each other for a moment that felt longer than it was, and for the first time, their partnership felt like something deeper, something quietly growing. When they returned to the house, Lily jumped into Clara's arms, relieved they were safe. Michael handed John a towel, trying to act mature even though he was worried. Clara squeezed Lily gently, and John placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. The storm outside grew stronger. But inside the house, there was warmth, a sense of unity, a sense of being a real family. After putting the children to bed, John found Clara sitting near the fireplace, drying her hair with a small towel. He sat down across from her, and the crackling fire filled the quiet space. You know, he said softly, I'm not the kind of man who rushes things. But I want you to know something. She looked up at him. What is it? This marriage, I want it to grow. Not just for the children, but for us. Clara's breath caught slightly. She didn't say anything right away, but her eyes softened in a way he had never seen before. John, she whispered, we are already growing. He smiled gently. Good. Then maybe one day, we won't just be partners. Maybe we'll be something more. Clara didn't promise anything, and John didn't expect her to. Instead, she gave him a warm, honest smile. A smile that said she wasn't running. A smile that said she was open to the future. Outside, the storm slowly began to calm. The thunder faded. The rain softened. And inside the ranch house, two adults sat in peaceful silence, knowing they were no longer alone in life. They were building something real, something steady, something hopeful, something their children could rely on. And although neither spoke the words aloud, both understood the same truth. This marriage of convenience had quietly turned into a marriage of possibility. And with each passing day, that possibility grew a little stronger. One shared smile. One shared task. one shared moment at a time.